I'm going to ask Mike questions, and he doesn't even know what I'm going to ask him. Check this out. Welcome to another episode of Aston1936.com from the UK. I'm here with Mike from Bamford Rose. We're in his shop today, and I'm going to do some Ask Mike quick fire questions and see what he comes up with for answers. So he doesn't know what's on the list, so we'll see what happens here. What are the biggest myths about AMDS?
I don't know. I'll tell you what I know about it. Having it is one thing, knowing how to use it is another. It's quite a powerful tool. You can cause quite a lot of damage with it.
Can you retune a car with it?
Absolutely not. You could only flash in files that are fixed from the factory. So if you need to reprogram your body control module, high speed, low speed can, engine controller, door modules, you can do that.
But I'm not going to sit there and change my fueling curve. You know,
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Impossible to do that through AMDS.
Yeah, because what's AMDS stand for? Aston Martin Dealer
Diagnostic System.
Diagnostic System, right?
Yeah.
So this is a dealer tool. This isn't a tuner tool.
Yeah, correct. And in this workshop, AMDS is just one tool of many electronic diagnostic tools that we use to fix a car. It's fairly unintelligent compared to other automakers' diagnostic tools. And AMDS will tell you symptoms rather than absolute definitive root cause. So you'll have to use those symptoms and those fault codes to take you down a path of diagnostics and fixing a problem. Sometimes on some of the cars, even if you've got like on a new Bosch Vanquish, we've had cars that have had crank sensor failures, yeah? And there isn't a fault code that comes up and says crankshaft sensor failure. Yeah? You just have to piece bits of information together and through experience know what it takes to fix a car. This is why even in franchise dealerships, they'll get someone completely new to the brand. They could be a great technician and it's no negative comments on their ability, but they've not been trained on the product that they're working on. So without training, no one can work on it.
Right.
The dealerships will send them on the training course for the newer cars. They'll have no training whatsoever for an old DB9. They'll plug AMDS in and they'll have no clue how to fix the car.
Yeah. And I found myself sort of in that, you know, I was on the holy grail search of trying to get myself a personal AMDS, which I finally did. And then I realized once I got it, I was like, oh, how do you use this? And you know, what do you do with it? So I think it's that experience that has to be behind the use of the AMDS to really drive into the solutions, you know, for the issues in the car. It's a DTC, you know, troubleshooting thing, but it may tell you you have a misfire, it may tell you you have low fuel pressure, but it doesn't tell you why, you know, so you've got to have experience to figure that out. It doesn't just tell you, oh, there's a break in the fuel line or the fuel pump's gone bad or something like that. So those of you that are hunting for AMDSs, make sure you know why you're searching for one. It may not be doing what you want it to do. All right, how bulletproof are the ECUs in the various cars?
What, for reverse polarity or just going wrong? Yeah, the Spanish oak, Ford tested that to death. That's so bulletproof, it's unreal.
And the Spanish oak is in which cars?
DB9, V8 Vantage. The 6-speed Vanquish and Rapide, 8-speed went to Bosch. So your DBS, your V12V, basically 04 to, what was it, 15, something like that. V8 always had Spanish oak. DB9 always had Spanish oak. DB7 had a previous iteration that would have been something like Eek or Black Oak. Vanquish had P-Tech. And then the newer evolution was Spanish oak. So
Spanish oak, pretty bulletproof. And then I've heard that the Gen 1 Vanquish one, which you called Eek?
P-Tech.
P-Tech. Yeah. So that one, is it pretty brittle?
Yeah, it can have some failures. Coil drivers, the throttle drivers, and when those diagnostics fail, the system will put the car into limpo. Because those chips, microchips, are becoming obsolete, it's pretty difficult to repair those. And even today, the factory do not stock remanufactured PTEC units. So this is why you treat your electrical system with real care. As we discussed in another video, you wouldn't boost it, you wouldn't jump it with a load of functions turned on, you'd probably just trickle charge it back up to full power. So they can be a little bit fragile. But Spanish oak, when I was sort of component engineer for the factory, you'd see quite a lot of warranty returns for ECUs, because apparently in a dealership it was diagnosed as a particular problem was the ECU, but when you test it, it never is. It's some other problem on the car. On the bench, the ECU performs perfectly.
So the ECU replacement was almost like the Hail Mary. Well, they've run out of their own sleuthing skills, so it must be the ECU. Let's try swapping the ECU.
See, on my Ford pickup truck, that is the same ECU as what was on DB7, and that's pretty fragile. So in my spares waiting to go, I've got a coded ECU to my VIN that I can just pick up and put on. On my own V8 Vantage, I don't have a spare ECU because I don't think that the Spanish oak is going to fail on me. And I don't think it necessary to sort of protect myself and have in my spares a Spanish oak ECU.
Okay, well that's great. So what does the sport button do on a DB9? Does it make my car 1,000 horsepower and stiffen my suspension? So I have this button, a sport button on the center console. Does it make it into a race car?
Yeah, it puts an LED on the sport button. That's what you sport.
I feel like I'm going faster.
It does different things on different cars. The early DB9, it just gives you a slightly different shift map. And if you have it in sport mode and you're in touch mode on the pedals, you can bang it off the rev limiter.
So that'll let me get all the way to the red line if I want to. If I'm still in just automatic drive mode, will I be able to hit red line, or will it start shifting?
No, in normal mode, it won't let you hang it off the rev limiter. On the next iteration of car, like a DBS, the sport button gave a noticeably different throttle progression map. So you'd have had sharper acceleration sort of for the same pedal input, which I sort of disagree with. I'm a bit old school. I'd sooner just have a linear relationship between the pedal and the throttle, and I'll sort whatever progression I want out myself by pressing the pedal however far I want it myself.
So they were sort of cheating me into thinking the car was more powerful, because if a half tip in with the pedal before would just give me 50% power, and now maybe like a half tip in with the pedal would be like almost full throttle. I'm like, oh man, that's really hauling butt now.
I hate it when cars, you're going down the road and they're on, you're on say 50% pedal, and then you just go full 50, full 50, and there's no change in engine note, so it's not actually doing anything, because for 50 you're already at 90-degree blade angle.
Right.
I hate it. I'd sooner have a completely linear relationship between pedal and throttle. It's one of those things, car companies, they all do it. It's the same as like a fuel gauge. I would sooner have a completely linear
fuel gauge.
Yeah, but don't hang on the full and then all of a sudden drop off just to make you think that the car has done more miles for your full tank of fuel. So yeah, sport button, bit gimmicky.
It's a bit of an illusion. Other than on my car, it changes the transmission shift point modes to be a little higher RPM kind of thing.
Yeah, now what we do is we remap engine management systems to make that sport button actually more usable. So we can have non-sport being completely silent on the exhaust valve, and have sport being completely open on the exhaust valve. So instead of introducing an aftermarket sort of toggle switch, you can have it nice and neat on the dashboard. If you wanted to, you could do different things with throttle progression maps in sport mode as well. So
you could use that input as a trigger to do more custom things, but that's something you could do here at Bamford Rose. It's not a DIY project. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is the Bilstein Suspension Upgrade a DIY project? I have a 2005 DB9 with the old, what do you call it, the Multimatic dynamic dampers that are, as you sort of described, kind of wooden. And mine are 20 years old, so I'm starting to think about, well, I wonder, can I get it done? So is that a DIY, upgrade to switch to the Bilstein on a DB9?
Yeah, 100%. 2012 DB9 dampers, so this is the last evolution until it went electronic, and they will just retrofit on the mounting points of a DB9. If you wanted to, you could customize your ride height. You could machine a different groove in the leg of the damper and reset the platform and get slightly different ride height. And on the V8, it's not so much a DIY, because you definitely will, if you retrofit the Bilstein to a Dynamics car, you definitely will have to set your ride height.
Because otherwise it'll ride high or something.
Yeah.
I think I've seen YouTube or Facebook forums where they've done the swap, but they didn't realize that it was going to change the ride height, and they've got, you know, like a 3 or 4 inch gap over the wheel tops.
For suspension, we are a consumer of someone else's products. Yeah, I don't have my own damping solution. I've driven cars that have got coilovers on. They all lose the factory refinement, and you know, essentially Astons are GT cruisers, so you're going to want the best compromise between a sports car and a GT cruiser. And in the factory damper, you've got all that noise, vibration, harshness, engineering inbuilt into the component already. You've got the factory's selection of a fixed rate damper curve, the best compromise between comfort and sport. So that's why I'm an advocate of retrofitting the very latest factory products onto the earlier cars. The cars that I've driven with coilovers, they might be good in one respect, but they compromise in others. And when it's all said and done, and I'm a consumer for my customers of suspension products, I'd prefer to retrofit factory dampers for the reasons I've said.
Well, I think you're probably going to see me give this a try. There might be another reason I've been here trying to learn some stuff in the UK, so I'm going to see if I can do a Bilstein upgrade to my car when I get back to the US. All right, next question. Relating to suspension. So here let me set the stage. So bushing creep leads to bushing creak. Yeah. And my car's had this twice now. I had it right when I got my car, where when the car was cold and I was backing out of the driveway and I really would flex the front suspension and get it like there was grease missing from the suspension. And I went and I got a new set of upper control arms, and I fitted those, and that solved the problem. And I did a video that'll probably be linked up here right now. But here we are, 8 years later, and the creak is back. And I've gone in and I've inspected my upper control arm bushes again, and there's a gap. I can see the bushing creep has happened again. So this time I looked at the price of a set of upper control arms, and I think the price is 3x what it was 8 years ago. And I believe I can't order it right now because it's on back order. I'm not sure about that right now. I haven't double checked. So there is a lot of talk out in the forums now that there are two alternatives. There's polyurethane bushings that are available now from a particular company that aren't super cheap either. And then there's some really inexpensive rubber Chinese bushings that you can get from like Alibaba or someplace like that. You might see them on eBay. So, Mike, what are your opinions on poly bushes and alternative bushings?
So on the upper suspension arms that you spoke about, the way that bush creeps out of the arm, the way the arm is mounted into the frame, it's not safety critical. It's not going to fail, it's not going to clunk or bang, and it's always going to get you from A to B. You're just going to notice dynamic performance is degrading, maybe on change of direction. It's just mushing, slowing down, not taking the arc that you would normally expect the car to take. And you hear this horrendous creaking sound every time you go over a bump. So that's the upper arms. On the lower arms, probably the concern would be the rear caster bush. Because if that fails, and it will fail, then you've got the arm.
And is that the big one that's like a horizontal donut? Yeah. Okay.
When it comes to repairing, at the moment, there is some parts supply issues, but I'd prefer to always fit factory arms. Again, this is just personal preference. There's no right or wrong answer to this. I've driven cars that have had different types of aftermarket bushing in, and the bushing tuning is not in harmony with the damper tuning, so the car just feels wrong. When it pitches into a corner, you can just feel too stiffer sort of suspension arm bushing and too floppy damping control, and it just all feels wrong. So I'd prefer to keep factory noise, vibration, harshness and tuning as the factory intended, and I'd always be sticking factory control arms in. But you're right, if you can't get hold of certain parts for a bit, you'd have to consider another option. As a job, the process of removing the bushes and putting the aftermarket ones in is not pleasant. Yeah? It's quite a difficult job, it's quite time consuming. So by the time you've paid for it commercially, you pay for the labour to get the bushes out your old arms, put the new ones in, fit it to the car, look at the price of the factory arm, you're probably not too far off it.
And if you did the factory arm, you also get a new upper ball joint.
Yeah.
At the same time, where if you're just refurbing your bushings on the upper arm, you're just doing 2/3 of the components that are in there. Okay, well, fair enough. So another thing I see about in the forums is, and I get asked actually quite often because I did a big series on this, can I use cheap Chinese coil packs versus the original coil packs? So I believe there are coil packs available now on eBay where you can get a set of 12 for $120 US versus I think it's almost $120 per coil pack to get one from Aston Martin directly. Now, this is a critical component inside the car, so my personal opinion is I'd be super reluctant to put an aftermarket unknown thing on that could lead to misfire and cat failure and all sorts of bad things like that. But conversely, people tell me now that the Aston Martin coil packs that you would get from Aston Martin are made in China. So do you have any opinion on coil packs?
Yeah. So my previous job at Aston for engine calibration, I would have been putting the physical constants of the coil pack, like dwell time and other constants, into the engine management system. So yeah, it is crucial that the component fitted is correct and behaves with how the engine management system is programmed. But just rewind a little bit. It is an independent shop's job to find the most cheapest, best quality solution for the customers. Else the independent will just be accused of being box fitters, which is what the franchise dealer network is. A good example of this will be on a classic Vanquish, where the ASM pump comes from Magneti Marelli. You can buy that from a Fiat dealership. It's 100% identical part. And even a Fiat dealer is making a markup on this part. And in the United Kingdom, they're selling that for about £350, £400, something like that. Aston Martin want to have you for £1,300 in the UK for that. So it's the independent's job to find that clever solution and just bill the customer for what it took to buy it from Fiat. But on coils, because you really don't know the internal workings of it and whether that corresponds with constants that are set in the engine management system, I would always be buying the factory component that comes with quality assurance that it's a perfect...
It meets spec for the car.
So even if the factory component was identified as having its origins in some cheaper
manufacturing country,
yeah, you know 100% it is correct, whereas you don't know that for any other aftermarket part.
Yeah, and that's what worries me is that, you know, so those variables you talk about, probably, you know, dwell and energy levels and certain things, resistance and insulation, there isn't a sticker on the factory coil and a sticker on the alternate coil that you could compare those values. It's just they look the same, they fit the hole, but you have no idea what each component is really spec'd to do. So the only way to know for sure then is to fit the factory one, and that's always what I do, is fit the factory coil pack. All right, so I'm a DIYer, and I try to do my best to take good care of my car, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the most overlooked aspect of a DIY self-service person? Like when they do it for themselves, what do you think they're usually missing? that's important that they shouldn't?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Yeah, we're fixing these Astons commercially, yeah. But any car or motorbike that we have, we're fixing them in our workshop. But essentially, we're DIYers, yeah.
Yep.
So I think, and to give credit to DIYers that I see on forums, when they have a go at jobs, they're doing it properly. They've got ramps, they're lifting it out properly. I think the only things that we see is where they're doing jobs totally like not the way that we would do them commercially. So a front cover on a V8, for instance, you'll see pictures, and they're very proud of their work, and why not? You know, you've done it at home, but they've taken all the ancillaries out and done the front cover job in place rather than taking the engine out. And I can guarantee that we would be able to do it quicker taking the engine out than trying to do it the long way. So I'd probably just say fair play to people that attack it at home DIY. It's just rather than overlooking stuff and not choosing a certain grade oil or something like that, it would probably be doing jobs in an extremely long-winded way.
Yeah. So, well, maybe they're enjoying it, but yeah, I can see the front timing cover I would never do myself. I would bring it to a specialist that would know how to do it. But how about for somebody that's just trying to do like their annual service? Is there something that, because, you know, I've seen the Aston Martin checklist, you know, the factory checklist. There's a lot of steps like inspect brake lines and this and that. Personally, I think a lot of people think doing the DIY service for themselves at home is drop the oil, change the filter.
Yeah, okay. Very simply then, again, it's not rocket science. Probably biggest thing that might get overlooked is take an airline to your fuel filler drain holes.
Line.
Because the amount of cars that come to us broken down and you lift up the fuel flap, it's full of water, the water's got into the fuel and the engine's running poorly. If you just get an airline and buzz out your drain lines, you've avoided that problem. So that's probably is the biggest overlooked thing.
Video coming soon. So that's just the one around the fuel cap. Are there other drain lines that you would blow out at the same time? Like
yeah, there's a few across the car. The under bonnet ones, the water drain on the rear end.
I'll be asking before I leave. All right, next. What is the most overlooked modern Aston? If I was shopping for an Aston Martin right now, it's like everybody has the passion. I'm going to go get myself a DBS 6-speed and Casino Royale. But in your opinion, what do you think sort of the Aston that people aren't paying enough attention to that might be the actual better choice might be?
It's difficult because people choose cars for different reasons. There's a customer today, that V12 ES there that's being worked on. He's sort of grown out of that and needs to put the grandkids in the car and wants a Rapide. Rapide S, phenomenal cars. They handle so well. 8-speed gearbox. They fly up and down the gearbox with speed. Do a few modifications and get that 565 motor to just over 600. And this is an awesome car. Very, very overlooked. And in fact, it's quite a surprise. He was trying to trade the V12 ES in, and even in this country, 17 franchise dealers, there's very few that would actually want to deal in Rapides. This is because ultimately they're sales outlets, so they need to move units, and a Rapide will probably mean them creating a birthday cake for it because it's stopped in the shop for 12 months. It's just going to be
sitting there a long time waiting for its new owner.
So that inevitably means really there's some deals to be done on Rapide. Rapide AMR is absolutely awesome, but they do go for a lot of money.
All right, good. What are the most common sources of rattles in a DB9? My car, like any 20-year-old car now, has, you know, odd sounds that come from different places. Are there any common sources of rattles that people could go chasing?
Yeah, dashboard creaking, there's a common couple of fixes that you get through just underneath the screen. Tablet screen rattling, door cards, stuff in door cards rattling, rear environment rattles, just leather creaking. You've got to give it what we call the TVR interior trim fit thump and just tap
Push
away
all
at panels.
Oh, and just wait to see if you hear a shake. If you hear if you can recreate the noise and you know it's behind a panel, then you can dig for it.
Maybe this is because a garage has had the trim panels out to do something, and some wire wasn't plugged back in properly on its plastic fir tree, and they've not realised the significance of a wire dangling then translates into
a tap.
But chasing annoying squeaks and rattles is pretty common.
All right, well, thanks, Mike.
But it wasn't too stressful. I thought you were going to put me to the test on.
Oh man, now I'm thinking like I missed
settings or
no torque settings. No, I didn't have anything like that in mind. So I really appreciate you giving me a few minutes of time to just rapid fire you. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Up here you're going to find a link to probably the next video in the series, maybe something interesting that Mike and I were talking about, maybe the suspension thing that I'll do in the future. Down here, it'd be great if you'd subscribe, and if you can, like this video. And as always, I'd love to hear your comments. What questions would you have asked Mike? So at least I'll have them lined up for my next time I get to see him in person. Thanks for watching.